Hi, everybody. This is Dan Klingesmith, author of the Creating G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero book series, as well as host to the Toy Files. And today, I'm honored to have Allan Ferraro, Senior Industrial Designer of the 3D Mech Tech Group, with me. And we're going to talk a little bit about G.I. Joe. We may venture off in a couple other things that he worked on. But primarily, today's discussion is going to be around G.I. Joe, but first we'll start off with some things about Allan's past and then lead into his time at Hasbro. So let's go and bring Allan on. Allan, how's it going?
Hey, Dan, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Well, thanks for joining me, and I'm glad to have you on here and for people to really learn about your role and what you did at Hasbro and some of the different projects you worked on over there.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I kind of let people know ahead of time, just really the format is just really get to know you in the beginning and a little bit about your past. And then we'll get into, your time at Hasbro and some specific questions about that. And then G.I. Joe itself. And, I know we've talked many times where you've worked on several different brands, and that's something that we could touch upon a little bit here. But primarily, hopefully, we'll have you back on to talk more in detail about those different brands that you worked on. So
sure. Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, as I always like to ask people, initially is, how early on in life were you interested in industrial design? What did you study in college in order to get into this area?
Oh boy, my past is so convoluted when it comes to getting to where I am today, or where I ended up at Hasbro. But to give you the Reader's Digest version, as early probably started in my father's garage building spaceships out of plywood and styrene and all kinds of junk. After the Star Wars movies came out, I really got into that building stuff. But my family has always been surrounded by working with the hands, building all kinds of stuff. So it was in the blood already. But I think that's when I really loved thinking about things creatively.
Okay. And what did your dad do?
My father, he was a carpenter. His main business was actually laying floors, hardwood floors, and vinyl, vinyl floors and things like that. He had his own business, and my uncle, who was living with us at the time, was also a carpenter, and he built kitchen cabinets. He framed houses. He actually, did a lot of that stuff. But my life was surrounded by both those elements. And when I wasn't with them, I was in the kitchen with my mother while she was baking cookies and things like that. She was also a seamstress, so I learned how to sew. There's like all kinds of stuff happening in my house.
All around, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome. And I think that's usually the case with some people. It's that influence from their parents, initially, going back to that time. Now, where did you go to college, and what did you study in college to kind of even master your skill set?
So I went to the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. The school was surrounded in, or its focus was on studio art. Studio art being like you could focus on any one of the artistic disciplines, and they don't really tell you to funnel your energy into one thing, even though everybody ends up doing that. So I went there for animation and filmmaking, and that was my main study. But while I was there, I also took jewelry making, I took painting, I took sculpting, I took all kinds of different things along with the animation and filmmaking. But better than 75-80% of my time was focused on filmmaking.
Oh, wow. Okay. Would be a lot different animation today than it was then, huh?
Yeah, the drive was I was at the tail end of the whole 3D special effects thing with Star Wars. After I graduated, everything started going digital. Everything started going with the computers and stuff like that. So while there was still a lot of stop motion animation happening, which is what I liked doing while I was in school, most of it was, in school, most of what we were doing was like cell animation, paper animation, that sort of thing. And
Okay.
what was happening in the industry was actually moving more technology based, moving toward the digital and the computer graphics. So I was zigging while they were zagging.
And what year did you graduate then?
86.
Okay. And have you kept up with any of that, like stop motion? Have you done anything like on your own, or?
I wished I had, but life kind of throws you all
Life.
different directions, all different ways and everything. And I'm the type of person that just goes with it. You know what I mean? So after college, I had one of two choices. I could have either gone back to New Jersey to stay with my uncle and my father doing the businesses and stuff like that, or I could have stayed up here and tried to carve my own life. And I decided to stay up here and try it. And when I graduated, I'm like thinking, okay, what can I do? And I'm like, well, I could build things. I could work with my hands and build things. And I interviewed at a model shop in Needham that built prototypes, engineering models for the military, for the medical industry, for the computer industry, and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I landed, and that's what I ended up doing for a number of years before I went to Hasbro.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of my questions, was what type of positions you held prior to the toy industry. So you were already building models and stuff like that.
I started off in cleaning casted parts in the casting department, and I ended up being a master model maker after 4 years there. 4.5 years there. I ended up being a master model maker. So I was doing the patterns, I was doing the models, I was doing all kinds of stuff. So
wow,
it was a lot of fun.
Your formal position, right?
What's that?
Is this at your formal position you're saying, or at Hasbro?
My position there, yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then I'll have to get you in touch with. There's some people I know who still do stop motion, so maybe now you can dabble into that a little bit if you're ever interested. So it's former Hasbro people, I'm saying. So now going back to your childhood, what were some of your favorite toys as a child, and how did they influence any decisions you maybe worked on? Working on different brands.
As a child, the types of toys I played with.
Yeah,
I was interested in.
Favorites, and did they influence?
Yeah, being a product of the '60s and early '70s, I was, until G.I. Joe came out, I was building things. They gave me building blocks. They gave me ticker toys. That's what I was really interested in. I really had no desire for anything else. If I wasn't doing that, I was outside playing in the backyard with my brothers and my neighbors and stuff like that. One of the biggest things we did was like role playing. We always played Army in the backyard. There was a series of empty lots. Now there's condominiums there, but there was a series of empty lots. It probably amounted to 2 acres of land, and we used it as our battleground. We built forts back there and everything like that. So with the advent of G.I. Joe, and I was still a little on the young side to be playing with G.I. Joe when it first came out, but by 68, 69 Christmas, I was getting my first G.I. Joe.
Nice.
But mind you, I was still playing with Lincoln Logs. I was still playing with the building blocks. I was still doing that, and I was just marrying the two. The small green plastic soldiers, all that kind of stuff. So it was bleeding into the whole G.I. Joe world, but I was still real heavily influenced by the whole building block world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember doing that as a kid, bringing in different elements. I had 2 sisters, so.
I should also add, even before G.I. Joe was electric trains, Lionel lived in my house all the time, and that was really my biggest, most favorite toy, but it only came out at Christmas time.
Yeah.
So I only had a small window to play with them, but it was the most fun that I ever had was having my Green Army men with the trains and the nativity scene and all that kind of stuff. So
did you ever get the G.I. Joe train that ever came out? Did you ever get that one?
No. And I saw it. There was a picture of it. There was a picture of it somewhere. I forget where I saw it at Hasbro. Tycho made it. Yeah. And it was nice. It was a nice train. But no, that by then, when that came out, I was already past that point.
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause I know you're still in the trains and stuff like that. Did you ever talk to Greg Bernstein about trains? Like, did you guys?
We did. We actually, even while I was there, he was into S gauge. He knew I was into Lionel, and we conferred a lot. And he was like, "Well, you should get into S gauge," and I'm like, "Well, you should get into O gauge." And it's always a back and forth with us. But eventually, I did. Eventually, I did get into S gauge too.
That's
So
funny. That's funny. So we could do it. We can do an episode on just trains. Who knows? A whole other community.
that's right.
Uh, well, like you already shared, I mean, some of the positions that you've held, and so we will kind of skip over that. But now diving a little bit into more to Hasbro specific questions. The first question I always ask people is typically is, please explain, when you started at Hasbro, why did you decide to apply there? And then what were some of your roles and responsibilities? And I think with your role, unlike some of the other people I've interviewed, I don't know if a lot of people know what the 3D Mech Tech Group does. So I think if you could really expand upon that and kind of talk about your role and responsibilities, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, to begin with, what drove me to Hasbro was actually marriage. I met Carol, my wife, where I worked at the model shop, and we got married. And we wanted to root. We wanted to set down roots. We wanted to, get a house. We wanted to have a family and everything like that. And being at that model shop was just not the future for me. And I had a friend who was already in Mech Tech who actually worked at that model shop. And he applied to Hasbro and got into the 3D Mech Tech Group. And every time we got together, he's like, "Oh, you got to come to Hasbro. You got to come to Hasbro," all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm good enough to get in there. And, don't worry, you'd fit in really well. And so I eventually applied. I had a couple interviews. They didn't pan out. And then finally he had left to go back home to upstate New York. And it opened up a position in the 3D Mech Tech Group. And he basically told the guy to hire me, and Rich Rossi to hire me. Okay. I don't know if that's really the driver, but I mean, he told me, "Hey, you're set up. You just have to go in for the interview." So I put in my, my resume and stuff like that. And Rich called me in and he's like, "Yeah, if you want the job, it's yours." And so, hey, okay, that's fine, but that was my shoe-in right there, Awesome. It was a job that I applied for. It was a position I interviewed for, and I did get it. So
that's awesome.
That's
the first time around. Was it with Rich that you interviewed, or did you interview somebody else the first time?
I interviewed with Rich. Yeah, Rich Rossi. Yeah.
Okay.
So that got me in. Roles and responsibilities in 3D Mech Tech followed a lot of what I was already familiar with and felt comfortable with. It was building 3D models of whatever the designers wanted. Also in that was also making mechanisms. Most of the mechanisms I made at the early stages were figure mechanisms. Like there's for instance, backpack. Kurt Groen would design a backpack and he wanted the string, wanted it to go on the back of the figure and pull the strings at both ends and have it, go up and down. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of thing we did. We also built like the little weapons that G.I. Joe held and some of the little play sets that came with the figures and things like that, all the way up to building things like the Mudbuster and the Armor Bot and the Fort America and the headquarters, everything from soup to nuts. Mm-hmm. So that's what we were, and our models were ultimately used for presentation, and then in many cases were used as the tooling patterns for the molds.
So. And with you guys fell under the R&D.
Yes, right? Yeah. Specifically, I was in Boys Toys R&D.
Boys Toys R&D. Yeah. How did that work with the model shop itself? What was the difference between what you did versus what they had done?
Well, that is a really good question. And even to this day, I'm not even sure how I could answer that without sounding one way or the other. But, we did work in tandem a lot. A lot of times they took what we built and maybe they modified it a little bit so that it could actually be pulled from a rubber mold and, be used as a tooling pattern. But a lot of times the designers really wanted the model shop to use what like Bill Cook and I built for them, because they liked the end results. And what was nice about working with the designers was they always left it a little open-ended. You know, they drove us in a direction, but they said, hey, you know, this stuff, this little area gets some chotch, go nuts with it, you know. And that was the fun part of the job, was you got to kind of throw your little touches in there that maybe they didn't think about, you know, or maybe they wouldn't consider, or maybe they just felt so comfortable with us that, hey, you know, you guys have fun with it, you know.
And sometimes you would get like detailed renderings or drawings, right? And other times, 'cause I know a lot of these guys kit bash stuff, like the designers from the
Yes.
initial stage. Did you have a preference, like what you got from them, or what did it? Because I don't think they always accompany drawings didn't always accompany the kit bash model that they built, right? Sometimes they just give you the model, or
Well, no, actually, I think I want to say
or
all
did
of
they
the
have
things
to?
that I worked on had drawings
Okay.
with it, you know, because I think a lot of times they really needed the control of the size of the model. Like, for instance, the Mudbuster was a card, I believe, if I remember correctly, the Mudbuster was a carved piece of foam with chotch on it. You know, the Armor Bot was a carved piece of foam with chotch on it, and it really it resembled what like they wanted it to look like, but it needed to be real. It needed to fit the figure. It needed to stand up on its legs. It needed to hold a weapon. You know what I mean? It had to do whatever it needed to do. You know. So there had to be control drawings accompanied
That's true.
with.
Did it help having a 3D visual at least, even though you had to control drawings? Like, did it at least kind of give you some idea, like help you
Yeah,
along?
this is going to sound egotistical of me to say, but no, I didn't
Okay.
need the foam model because I probably one of the rare people who can actually see a 2D drawing and interpret it three-dimensionally and kind of know what it's going to look like at the end. And again, it sounds egotistical, but it's just part of my nature that,
Your skill set. I mean,
yeah, I could look at something flat and imagine what it would be like three-dimensionally. So
I take
it
it as a
it
skill.
was nice to have, but it wasn't a must-have for me. Yeah.
Gotcha. Um, you know, every designer has their own way of working through each project. Could you maybe spread some light or shed some light on how your personal design process, you know, from start to finish, and you know, what were some of the materials you used? You know, how much of it was done, you know, by hand, like modeling it out from hand versus like kit bashing and adding stuff like that, and maybe explain kit bashing to people who may not even know what kit bashing is. So,
Yeah. Process wise, you know, you're always looking at the very basic element of what it is you're building. And again, I'll use the Mudbuster as an example. The Mudbuster is a truck. It's basically a pickup truck, right? And and you always look at what is the underlying thing of it. It's the cab, it's the back end, it's the chassis underneath, you know, it's the roll cage, it's whatever it is. And then off of that, once you've built that, then you start looking at it and carving it up and saying, what can this be? What can that be? Oh, he wants a gas can hanging off of the back. He needs a missile holder for the back. You know what I mean? You start thinking about those elements and how you're going to integrate those in. Again, it starts basic and you're slowly building it up to a crescendo, you know, crescendo of what we used to call chotch, you know, and the chotch was what you referred to as the kit bash. And I could illustrate here.
yeah, yeah.
So I have the Mudbuster. This is the model I built. So it's starting off as a couple of elements. You got the chassis, and you got the main part with the roll cage, and there's another part underneath that's actually screwed on for the back wheels. And I just started off as a box with a cab on it. And then once all of that is built, then you can get into actually detailing the inside with tank parts, with computer parts, with whatever it is that you have. You know, you try to add a little bit of a flair to the bottom, even though it's not seen, with a universal joint, you know, some spring, you know, some leaf springs and things like that. So you're starting off with something basic, and you're building it up so that it's actually it looks like what the designers intended it to look like at the end. And everything is basically styrene. You know, we did cast some parts and glue them on, We took parts out of model kits. Sometimes we cast the parts from model kits because we liked the part so much. We didn't want to use it once. We wanted to use it many times. So we'd make a mold of the parts from model kits and use it over and over again. You know, and that was the fun part. That was the creative fun part. You just find ways of throwing those elements in so that it makes sense. It's not just a random thing, you know.
Any Easter eggs that you can think of off the top of your head with?
Oh, you know, again, another great question. Did I ever throw an Easter egg in a...
Like building it? I know label-wise, which we'll get to later, but...
Yeah. You know, I don't know that I was that creative back then. I think I was more focused on just making the designers happy with their end product, you know, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's their end product. It's supposed to be their vision of a vehicle, you know. Me throwing my twists in might be like going back to Dave Kunitz or somebody and saying, hey, you know, you had a solid fender over here. Can I carve it out and put like a wrapped up tripod for a machine gun in there? And he's, oh yeah, that would be great, you know, and stuff like that. So I wouldn't call it an Easter egg. I would just call it an enhancement to what he had. You know what I mean? So
no, and like you said, I mean, that's probably, and I think you've expressed this, you know, that's the fun part of the job. If you just had to build it as is, it may get, you know, kind of monotonous, but having using your imagination and adding your own elements, you know, I think it's fun. And being a kid, playing with, you know, like you said, playing Army and some G.I. Joe and stuff like that, and working with your hands and blocks. I mean,
I know you asked about Easter egg. I never did an Easter egg for G.I. Joe, but I can tell you I did do an Easter egg at Hasbro. So we did a line called Stargate, and we could save the whole Stargate conversation for another day too. But my Easter egg in Stargate was there was a vehicle. The only real vehicle in the movie was called the Scarab Glider, and it was the bad guy's ship, and it looked like a scarab. It looked like basically a flying stingray. And there's a channel detail in the ship that was supposed to be all like raised bumps and everything like that. And I did hieroglyphics, Egyptian hieroglyphics in there, because the movie was centered on the Egyptian past and everything. And I actually put my family history in Egyptian hieroglyphics along the wings of the Scarab Glider. And the story goes is that I told Rich that I was doing this, and so he helped me figure out how to actually get it done. You know, at steel plate etch or brass etch plating and all that kind of stuff. And we had it done. And Joe Marone, who was the head of engineering at the time, we had a meeting about tooling it, and they wanted to look for ways of cutting the price. And one of the first things he saw was the Egyptian hieroglyphics. You know, can we scrape those off and just make it a smooth channel? And Rich turned to him and said, are you kidding me? That's his family's history in Egyptian hieroglyphics. You're not going to scrape that off, you know? And he actually stood up for me on that one. It was really cool. But yeah, that was my only real Easter. I mean, in the classic term Easter egg, that was my only Easter egg I can think of at Hasbro.
I'll have to check it out. Now I'm going to have to go searching for it just to see what it looks like. So I can tell you right now, I know a few collectors who do that line, and I'm sure now they're going to be grabbing theirs as well and checking it out. So they're going to learn all about you now. If they can read the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So within your role, like you kind of mentioned, you know, you worked on Stargate, and I know you worked on Transformers and stuff. I know you worked on several different brands, but when you learned that you're going to be working on G.I. Joe, you know, how excited were you to be part of it? And what were some of the things you were looking forward to be working on with that brand?
Great question. Yeah, no, I was always a G.I. Joe fan because I grew up with it, obviously. And the very notion of actually working for the company that made G.I. Joe, one of the two most valuable toys in my past, you know, Lionel being the other one. It was exciting. It was a thrill, even just to be considered working there. Forget about actually working there. Just being able to go in for an interview was exciting to me. And actually going in there and finding that the people that I was working with were not only super beyond talent. I mean, it was crazy talent in there, but they were also real happy to be working side by side and like, let's get this done. And, there was a lot of energy when I was working there. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of positiveness. I mean, aside from, occasional, corporate shakeup and, and reorg and stuff like that, there was a lot of fun times, and I really cherished that. But I always felt like there are so many talented people here. How can so much talent be packed under one roof? People like Tom Hamilton and Kurt Groen and Bill Young and Guy Cassett. I mean, all of them were just I could never say enough positive things about every one of them.
Yeah, I mean, it really truly was, a unique time, and I think that's what's always drawn me towards my books was, really highlighting that, because it was really a team effort, and it wasn't just one individual and one idea. It really was a group and team effort that, the designer had their ideas, but you guys had to make it, 3D form, and from there, marketing had to sell it, to the consumer. So no, that's awesome. And then I see some 12-inch figures behind you. Are those your original ones from when you were a kid, or those?
Actually, it's a combined effort. A couple of them are my original ones, and like I said, growing up, my next door neighbor, who was a little older than me, also had them. And when he grew out of them, I inherited them. So, so I ended up.
Now.
Yes, and that's just a small portion. I still have like 4 or 5 of them up in my attic that I haven't pulled out yet. So.
At least you have them on display. That's the important thing. Do you recall what your first vehicle that you worked on, for G.I. Joe, and can share any stories, about it or any other vehicles?
Yeah, that was the Mudbuster was my first one. It was again, I'll say it was very exciting to work on it, and be able to put my thumbprint on a brand that I grew up with, not 3 3/4, obviously, but the whole G.I. Joe story, adding my little piece to the G.I. Joe story. So, and again, working with Dave Kunitz, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun because he loved the tchotch, he loved the detail. There wasn't enough. There was never enough detail. You had to pack it on. But you wanted to be deliberate about it. You didn't want it to look like a Christmas tree. You wanted it to look like what it needed to look like. It was so easy there to just pile it on, but it was a lot of fun. It was some things, some technical things to work out. He wanted the front end of the thing to, it's supposed to be spring loaded, so it pops out and stuff. So we had to work through those things. But that was a lot of fun. I'll get into the whole Shark 9000. That was another good one. But the backstory of that one was kind of sad. So I was probably, I want to say 4 or 5 months into my stint at my start at Hasbro, and Rich asked me if I wanted to work on this boat. It wasn't on the desk yet, but it was coming down the line. I saw Bill Young working on it. I'm like, yeah, I'd love to work on it. But at the same time, my wife was pregnant with our first child, AJ. And we found out, it was actually on her birthday in December, we found out that it was going to be a very difficult pregnancy, and we might actually lose him. So he was born 3 months premature. He was actually born within the week of me finishing the boat. All that time in the 3 months, from the time that the project was spoken of to the time that I actually turned it over to Rich, my day consisted of driving from Norwood into Boston, which is about a 25-minute drive, dropping my wife off to the hospital to be with AJ while he was in the NICU, while he was in the neonatal intensive care unit, driving down to Pawtucket to Hasbro, which is from that part of Boston about 35, 40 minutes, spending the day working on whatever I was working on, leaving, going back to the hospital, being there until about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night until they kicked us out, and bringing my wife back home and doing it all over again. This was every single day for that time period. And nobody knew. Nobody knew except Rich. Rich was the only one who knew that what was going on in my life. And yeah, when the boat was done and, you know, everybody was happy with it, and Rich was happy that I actually got it done on time and everything like that, I asked Bill, I said, would you mind, you know, putting AJ's birthday on it? And I'm like, yeah, you know, that would be great. You know, so he made the labels so that it was the AJ, it became the AJ boat, because there's AJ is on there, his birth date is on there, and everything like that. And it really made me feel good. Like I was like, you know, it was all worth doing all that shit. You know, now I got AJ, you know, immortalized in G.I. Joe,
which is awesome.
So,
And I've always
and
loved that.
Oddly enough, AJ grew up. He joined the military.
Yeah.
And now he's a captain in the Army. So go figure. He's my G.I. Joe. You know,
he is a G.I. Joe, a real G.I. Joe, right? So no, and I love that story because it does show, you know, through, you know, what you had to go through, and you know how, like you said, I'm, you know, sure Rich was very, you know, understanding and understood the situation that you're going through, and that's always important for an employer. You like to really, when you have those, you know, you always have those times where you're going to have disagreements, but when it's a tough situation, you know, you want an employer that's going to appreciate that and respect you and understand, I guess, have empathy. So that's awesome that he was willing to do that. And then, you know, Bill's of course one of the nicest guys I've talked to, so you know that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
You know, and you just made me think, you know, and I don't really have this as a question, but maybe you can expand upon it. You guys definitely had some fun, because I've seen some photos, you know, of you, I think, wearing the armor bot, I think from the commercial. I think you pulling out, like, I don't know if it's you or who, but someone's like pulling someone's tooth out in a cube, pretending they're pulling a tooth.
Yeah, that was Bill playing dentist on me in his
Okay.
office. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, no, we had a lot of good laughs there too. You know, another little story is Tom Hamilton worked on the Monster Blaster. Is that right? Is that what it's called? The Monster Blaster from
APC.
Mega Marines?
Yep.
All right. And I worked on the vehicle with in tandem with Bill Cook, and I'm going to get part of the story incorrect, or I'm going to tell it out of phase. But there was an engineer there who over-engineered everything, and that was one of his projects. Tom Hamilton always used to love busting beans with me about this engineer, and he happened to be the engineer working on that vehicle. And he would take one of the shots of that thing, and Hasbro's ceilings and R&D are like 2 stories high, and he would whip that thing up in the air, hit the ceiling, and come crashing down and see if he can get the thing to break. And it never broke. And I always laugh thinking about that story, because it was Tom Hamilton's like, oh, this is, and I don't remember the engineer's name. He's like, oh yeah, this is one of his. Let's see how strong this one is. And he would throw it up, and then he would jump and try and smash it. You know, try and jump on it and smash it, and you know, all that kind of stuff.
So essentially, you know, doing like a glorified drop test is what he was doing.
That's exactly right. Yeah, but it was the Tom Hamilton drop test for this one particular engineer that I always found amusing. You know, that it's like, let's see if we can get this thing to
was
break.
it a model of it that he was throwing?
No. It was a first shot of the vehicle.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The photo of me with the armor bot, that was in Vinny DeLeva's old office. He had that thing, and I wanted it. I asked him for it so many times. I'm like, can I have that thing? I worked on the model. Can I have it? Wouldn't budge. Wouldn't budge.
No. I think did they end up having to use it twice? I think they had to end up, because like, you know, when it changed from you know, remember originally the armor bot was originally intended not to be for Star Brigade, is going to be more military-esque. You know, Vinny's talking about
it was a tethered. The concept came in as a inventor item, and it was based off of those other tethered vehicles like the F-14 Tomcat and things like that. So it came in as a tethered robot. and they presented it. I actually tchatched it up. I have the original drawings for that one. It was really cool. And we tchatched it up, presented it. Everybody liked it, but they didn't want to stand alone. They wanted it to mean something. So they put it into G.I. Joe, excuse me. And it changed. I mean, it's not really anything like it was before originally. You know, it changed radically, but it was basically the same thing.
That's funny. Yeah, it's a fun. I don't know, what would you call it? Vehicle, I guess. Playset. I mean, it's kind of like a combination. You know, for what it is, but it's so big.
For what it is, yeah.
You know, and all the electronics. So you would have been responsible for. You know, would you have done all the electronics and all that thing?
No, there was with that one before it became the Armor Bot. The electronics were already in it. It was already programmed. It already did what they wanted it to do. Okay. All they really wanted was for us to make it look better than what it was. Really just a shell. When Bill and I got that thing, it was just really a shell.
Gotcha.
And we added the tchatch. We kit bashed the things on it, and it looked really cool. I wish I had a picture of it. It was really, really cool. That was a Chris Gross thing. Chris Gross was the designer on that.
Okay.
And
if you have a picture, I can add it later to this.
Yeah, I think they originally thought it should have been Transformers or something, part of Transformers or something like that, but looked at it and said, "Nah, it's G.I. Joe. Let's put it in with G.I. Joe. Let's figure out where it belongs." And then they said it was too expensive. I think that's what the story was. It was too expensive with the electronics, so they got rid of the electronics and they just put like the sound module. Like I think there's a sound module in that thing, if I'm not mistaken. So they put the sound module in it, much like the the Ford America. I don't know if they use the same thing. They might have done different sounds, but similar to the Ford America. Yeah.
Gotcha. You touched upon this a little bit, you know, just so I guess, you know, maybe expand upon it if you want. If not, we'll move on. But, you know, how important to you, or how important is collaboration and design, and to have a diverse group of people working on a brand, you know, who you thought differently, could express their opinions and ideas. You know, you talked a little bit about some of the stories, you know, that you worked on with, you know, Bill or with Kurt Groen or Vinny and any of those guys. Anything you can even build upon that, or you think?
Oh, collaboration. Well, there was no lacking collaboration at Hasbro. I mean, everybody from director on down was, you know, involved, from engineering to the model shop to marketing and even sales. You know, when a new concept or a new item was pitched in the theater, everybody was there. I mean, sales was there asking questions. So, and when they came back, they would, you know, hey, you know, thinking about it, how this thing is going to be on the shelf, you know, can we do something like this? And usually a lot of things that they asked about were more on the packaging, marketing end, but sometimes it actually did bleed into like what we put in the box at the end of the day. Like, should it be, you know, should it be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, a little bit wider? You know, should there be more color, less color? You know, that sort of thing. So there was always a lot of commenting back and forth that I would say better than 9 times out of 10, at the end of the day, all worked. It all worked well, you know.
And Bob Swanson talked about that in a recent interview, as far as those presentations with sort of Steven Hassenfeld and all those guys. And you were probably there with Alan Hassenfeld, I'm assuming. So from your time being on a brand, and I don't know if you touched upon this. What years did you work on at Hasbro itself, just so people can have an idea of what era?
What era? Oh, so I was hired in the late spring of 1991. Okay. And I worked through to 1997.
Okay. Just give people an idea.
Yeah.
So when working on figures or vehicles, you know, there were several that didn't come to final product, of course, you know, as with anything. Were there any favorites that you worked on and were disappointed that they never came to fruition? Anything you worked on, whether it be figures or vehicles?
Oh boy, that's a trick question. You're asking me to
I can give
dust
some
off
hints.
cobwebs. You're asking me to dust off the cobwebs, trying to
So-
make me remember everything that I worked on there. And I
Uh,
honestly, I can't think of anything off the top of my. You might know better because we've had so many conversations that I might have mentioned
The
something.
Man of War, Manimals, any of
Oh,
those?
the Man of War. Yeah, no, the Man of War was awesome. Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that one. Yeah, that one was built off of what was the original one? The
Had
that
like a
was
pom
built
pom
off.
gun, right?
What's that? The
Had like a pom pom gun. Like in the photo, I think I've seen like on the 30th anniversary card set. Looks like the Rolling Thunder essentially with a big pom pom gun.
right? Yes, yeah. It was based off of the Rolling Thunder. That's right. Yeah, that was fun to build. That was another Bill Young one, and I tell you, I had the most fun of doing the cockpit of that because if you ever saw pictures of it, it's nothing but computers.
Mm-hmm.
It was the most high tech vehicle in the GI Joe line, and unfortunately, I mean, to me, and I know a little bit about the space shuttle, but
Mm-hmm.
this to me blew the space shuttle away. This was just such a nicely executed, nicely designed, and nicely executed thing. Wasn't too thrilled about the gun itself, but I understood it. You know, it was based off of flywheel technology, shooting Nerf balls,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a lot of fun to play with because that thing hummed. You know, you crank that thing up and you let the balls drop. You get hit with one of those things at like 30, 40 yards away, you're still gonna get hit. You know what I mean? That thing was great. You know, that was just such a great product.
And I'm sure you guys did that too.
We did.
From knowing some of you guys, I'm sure that actually did happen in house or outside even. So
The pom pom gun, you mentioned the pom pom gun. That was a mechanism I built, and there was two of them in tandem that I built, and I was there probably for the better part of a year and a half at that point. And I was not happy that everything was going electronic, everything was going with battery operated. And because I had a lot of nieces and nephews buying them toys and everything requiring batteries, and you know, it just was a painful expense from my personal opinion. So I wanted to come up with a way of doing the same thing without batteries. Again, not putting anything on the Man of War, you know, not the Man of War, the what's it, the what was the big truck that had the Gatling gun on it?
the
The
battle
big
wagon.
battle wagon, thank you. Yes. Nothing against that because I thought that mechanism was really cool. But again, batteries. You know,
Mm-hmm.
can I do the same thing without batteries? And that was the antithesis. That was where it came from. And I presented both of them. The pom pom gun was the easier of the two,
Mm-hmm.
and they decided to go, you know, in that route. And it later become what was the name of the vehicle? I don't even know the name of the vehicle. It was a white vehicle.
The Blockbuster.
Yes, yeah. It wasn't my mechanism that ultimately went into production. Joe Falvo, I believe, is the engineer on it, and he developed a mechanism that was a lot more production friendly. You know, more safe. You know, from a production execution. But I got the point across. You know, the point across was, you know, you roll the vehicle on the ground and it just shot missiles out, and it reciprocated. The idea came from one of many toys that I played with and destroyed as a kid. I had a gun. I think it was a Navy gun, you know, that actually turned, rotated, and the gun shot. It didn't shoot any missiles. It just reciprocating barrels, and I loved the way that thing worked as a kid. So that was the inspiration for doing that type of, you know, mechanism.
Awesome.
My favorite though was the Gatling gun.
Yeah.
Because you cranked that thing and it just shot missiles out, and it worked perfectly too, but it was just too expensive to make.
Yeah.
So
now the Man of War, how far did I get along? I mean, we've seen the model of it, of course.
that's it. That was it.
Wow.
That's as far as it went. I don't even know if they made color castings of it, if it ever got shown to toy fair. I think it just was too expensive at the time to make.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There's something I came across recently. I'll have to go look at the book again. There's something like a different image. Oh, I think it was in a license guide or something. So it wasn't an actual physical model or anything, but it was like a licensing guide with a picture of it. I think it's in the latest, the volume 13 or 12, one of the, I don't know. I get confused on all those. Or maybe it's in 14 or 15, actually. Now I'm thinking about it. Maybe in 14. But either way, it did show some colors to it, which is interesting, because you kind of got a little bit of a sense of what it was supposed to eventually look like. But um, so it would have been such a cool,
That would have been a
vehicle.
very cool,
And
yeah, that would
there's,
have been a very cool model to have. Yeah.
that and kind of falls in line with, they used the Rolling Thunder for one of Frank Caroni's designs called the Revenge, which I don't think he worked on, but they could have used that chassis for a couple different vehicles like that initially.
Right.
But
Yeah.
such a fun vehicle.
Three or 4 years before, it would have definitely been in the line.
Yeah.
When they were coming out with things like the General and and the Defiant, and all those other big playset things, it really shook the ground.
Yeah, and there's a shift, and that's what we a lot of us talk about. There was that shift to figures in the '90s. I mean, there's less and less vehicles being made, and because originally Kirk Bazzigan always talks about the line was a vehicle line, and the figures were the accessories, and it kind of switched as the '90s came and stuff, and they added all the mechanisms into the weapons and stuff like that. So I mean, it's understandable, but yeah, there's definitely some vehicles that would have been really neat to see all along the brand's history, but especially towards the end, there's some really cool ones that would have been fun to see. As with any organization, change is inevitable. What were some of the major changes that you experienced over your tenure with Hasbro, and how did these changes impact you or anything you're working on?
So deep into 1994, and it was about the time of the what was it, the 30th anniversary at the Intrepid. We got word of the major reorg, and basically my department was going away. Wasn't too happy about that, but it opened up opportunity for me. So the 3D Mech Tech Group went away. We got folded into, who was left at that time, got folded into the design groups. And I went to one of only two design groups left in Hasbro, because at that time, all the boys' toys was being moved to Kenner in Cincinnati. It was, for me, it was tumultuous. I can't speak for any of the other designers. I don't know if they were happy, if they were sad, if they were mad. I kind of got introverted there, at that point, because I wasn't sure where I stood with anything of Hasbro. But Vinny reassured me. He came over and he knew I was upset about it, but he said, "Don't worry, because we still have some really nice brands." He was saying, "Oh, we've got Transformers, and we have other things that we can be working on." He said, "Don't worry about it," and so he really made me feel good about still being there, because some of my friends had been let go at that point, and I wasn't sure why I was still there, because I always, like I said before, I always felt like there was so much talent there that I'm like, I'm going to be the first one out if there's ever going to be a big shakeup. So yeah, I was on Vinny's team. I think we were called Team 4. They numbered our teams, and I think we were called Team 4. And we were so heavy with Italian names that, we decided to form a law firm, so it was like, and we had a plaque. We had a plaque that they gave us that had Deleva, Falvo, Ferraro, all these Italian names. And it was like a good list of like 10 names on there that were all Italian, all Italian names.
Italian team.
Yeah. Don DeLuca was on our team.
Oh, wow,
and he was one of the directors. It was fun. That being on that team was a lot of fun, and that was my introduction to working on Transformers and some of the other things that we did. before that ultimately went to Kenner as well.
Yeah. In your opinion, what characteristics made the GI Joe team successful? What was the most outstanding characteristic of that team in your opinion?
I think it was the passion, top down passion. I mean, Greg Bernston, Vinny DeLeva, Kirk Bazigian, right down to like, Kunitz and Young and Hamilton and, all of us all the way down. I think everybody saw the same thing and everybody wanted the same thing. Everybody wanted to deliver the best product, the best price, the best packaging, the best. Everybody poured everything into it. That's how I look at it. Mm-hmm. You can ask them, and they'll probably give you a different answer. They'll probably say something else, but just me being the fly on the wall and being part of that group at the same time, everybody that I worked with and everybody that I talked to and everybody that I interacted with all felt the same way. We all were driven by one thing, and that's making GI Joe a really great brand. Mm-hmm. Never really agreed with everything they did with GI Joe, but there was always passion behind everything that they did.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I 100% agree with you. And very few people have run into, like, if I, when I was talking to them personally, was working on GI Joe or just a Hasbro, was it more of a job, or was it more than that? And more people said is more than a job. There was a lot of passion that was driven into what they worked on, whether it be GI Joe or other brands. There's one time someone asked me, like, what, when we were talking about some of the things I had uncovered over time, different prototypes or artwork and stuff. Someone had asked me once, like, what was it? Like, what is it about GI Joe? Why do you think people kept this stuff? And I mean, my first answer was just like, because they loved it. They're just passionate about it. That's why this stuff, all the stuff I've been able to feature in the books, I'm very thankful that, you guys were able to hold on to some of this stuff so I could share it out and in the history of the brand. And I think it really does come back to the passion of it. And I'm sure, when you're working on a brand in the 90s, you probably didn't imagine being interviewed in 2025 on, what you were working on. But I mean, that just, hopefully that shows you and others the importance it's had on people like myself and other collectors and archivists, I guess you could say, as well, in appreciating all the work you guys put in. So
yeah, my hope and desire is that anybody who owns anything of the backroom Hasbro, the drawings, the renderings, I hope they never look at it as a profit center for them. I always hope that they look at it as a one and done thing that can never be replaced, that can never be imitated, that can never have a price tag put on it, because it's essentially that.
As far as, I know you touched upon a little bit. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share, but you always add personal aspects, or different people added personal aspects to the things that they were working on. Is there anything else besides? I know you shared a little bit about the decals with AJ and the Stargate. Kind of leads into my my other question, which we've already kind of touched upon, but brands that you worked on besides GI Joe, and maybe talk about, and we'll touch upon this now and we'll save more for later, but Transformers or anything else GI Joe related that you added sprinkled your little personal touch into it.
Well, yeah, I mentioned the Scarab glider from Stargate.
Mm-hmm.
There was a initial line of Transformers that I worked on that were called Flip Changers. They later went into the Beast Wars line, but there was a tow truck, a racing car, and 2 jets, and that represented at the time my wife, myself, AJ, and my son Tommy, because my son David hadn't been born yet. Mm-hmm. So I had their names and their birthdays, all of our names and all of our birthdays on the decals on the deco and the decals of each one of those vehicles. Mm-hmm. I didn't really, as much as I liked the notion of being able to thumbprint it product like that, it was never really in the forefront of my mind. It was always like, oh, by the way, I could do this. You know what I mean? It was more like a light bulb at the spur of the moment type of, I have the opportunity, so I'm going to take it, you know? But the opportunities never really were, it wasn't really, I was looking for the opportunities. It was always like, what is the best product? What is the best deal? And, oh, by the way, I can do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's for most people. I think, you know, people, I mean, all the vehicle drivers you hear, you know, birthdays, names, you know, parents, you know, there's all kinds of fun stories behind them. So it's cool that you were able to incorporate some of yourself too. You know, and it wasn't just the designers who had designed the vehicles or whatnot, but you know, and even like Kurt Grown, his brother, you know what I mean? So it's fun. It's fun that you guys were able to sneak those things in, or, you know, get permission in some cases. You know, one of the last questions before we wrap it is, you know, for you, and you kind of touched upon this, but what separates G.I. Joe from all the other toy lines that you worked on?
I think it's the mystique of the storyline, and I'm not sure that the storyline was ever really capitalized fully. You know, we were always told that G.I. Joe transcends World War II, transcends the Korean War, transcends everything, and that's basically the story of G.I. Joe. But you know, the idea, the soul of G.I. Joe to me goes back to the, you know, the very beginning. And when I say the very beginning, I mean our roots as a country, you know, the Revolutionary War. And part of that passion in me, which I'm a rabid historian when it comes to American history, that it was a failed, to me, it was a failed opportunity that we didn't take advantage of, that we've solely focused on the immediate past and the present and partially the future, but we never really explored where G.I. Joe really came from. You know, oh, it's Joseph Colton, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, but it never really explored the mysticism, you know, call it the mysticism of who we are, you know, of where G.I. Joe really came from. It's the guy who stands up for right, and who stands up for right. You know, it goes back to John Adams. It goes back to George Washington. It goes back to where we came from as a country, as a nation, and all the people who risked everything to bring us to where we are today, where we have, you know, we have our modern day heroes. You know, G.I. Joe is one of them, you know, but we never really, I think we really never capitalized. So that's where my head is at when I think of G.I. Joe and what makes G.I. Joe what it is I think inside of each one of those little figures is the history of doing what's right, you know, the history of standing up for the right things and not the wrong things, you know. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't stop and start in the 20th century. It goes way beyond that. It goes way before that, you know.
No, it's good. It's a good way to think about it and a good way to put it. And yeah, sometimes I think that's the challenge we have right now. You know, I don't get into politics and all that, but you know, as a nation, we need to realize like where we do come from. And I think, yeah, I think that's one of the challenges with G.I. Joe in today's age is, you know, the military aspect. You know, some people, they're nervous to touch upon it or really expand upon it. I mean, they do have the new line that's out right now, but it's more for collectors. It really is not geared towards kids and stuff. But no, I agree with you. And, you know, I know that there's Cobra fans out there. So even though they're not always in the good, you know.
Yeah, but even from a storyline, where did Cobra come from? Did it come from the Nazis? Did it come from, you know, all the bad that was raveled up in the centuries of human existence? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean about, I think, a failed opportunity when it comes to actually telling the story of G.I. Joe, is that it's done a great job in the here and now. But I think it's the here and now is only one small segment of the entire storyline, you know?
I agree. But no, I agree with you, and I appreciate you sharing that. And, you know, it's something to think about. maybe someone who's listening to this will think about that. And
that was my hope when we got into the 12-inch figures, when the Hall of Fame came out and they were really trying to expand upon it. We had the 1994 anniversary thing, and we got together and wanted to auction off some things, and some of us made figures. I made a figure. That was the only figure I made that actually went anywhere, but it was of a Revolutionary War soldier, and it got put to auction. I can't remember how much it made. I think it was like $700-800 or something like that. But
that's a Christie's auction they did back then, huh?
Yeah, they did a Christie's auction. Yeah, and it came out really well. I mean, it obviously had a little bit of help in putting it together from other people there, but I was hoping that the image of that would spark something, would hopefully bring that element into it. They did do a George Washington.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I have it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say Kenner did take off with some of that stuff and did. I have some 12-inch stuff, and for people who know me and kind of my history, Hall of Fame kind of. I mean, I played with G.I. Joe as a kid, of course, but the Hall of Fame was what brought me back as a quote unquote collector. My mom was buying them for Christmas and stuff, and then I got into the classic collection, which I still have to this day, like the Civil War 2-pack set, which I think is just an awesome set. So yeah, and I know Kurt Grund worked on a lot of that stuff, as far as the vintage or classic or historical characters or figures, Patton and stuff like that. So it's at least they came out with some stuff on a 12-inch version. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see on the 3 3/4 inch what potentially could have happened. Last two questions I have is, as a designer, it's important to, it's of course important to have a range of influences and inspiration. Where did you draw your inspiration, or who did you draw your inspiration from, or where, and who's been your biggest influence throughout your career?
Oh, I'm going to start with the second one first, because that's an easier question to answer. The influence is a really hard answer. Is a really hard question to answer. But as far as people influencing me, I mean, I had so many. I could go back to my father, my uncle, my mother. They were like the glue in my family that really helped my brothers and I have an appreciation for actually working with our hands and not relying on other people to be creative for us. I had people that I worked around at the model shop that were really good at what they did, and I tried to learn as much as I could from them. Coming to Hasbro, who wasn't an influence, but if I had to name a few, I mean, Rich Rossi, the guy who hired me, Bill Young. I mean, I thought he was one of the most phenomenal designers I'd ever met. Tom Hamilton, a close second. And I don't want to slight anybody else. No. But and beyond that, when I got out of the toy industry and went into juvenile products, I've had people there that, I mean, I still talk to. I mean, I don't really reach out to very many people in my past, but there are a few that I do. And the guy that I worked with who hired me at Safety First, I'm still in touch with him. We talk near, I want to say weekly basis. We're at least texting each other and seeing what we're doing, what we're doing in our lives and stuff like that. But so yeah, there's been a lot of influence in my life that has only helped me thirst for more knowledge. You know what I mean? Just reach out and find more things to learn, and not be afraid to try and fail, As far as what's influenced me in my career, again, I think it's a hard question to really answer. I've always been fascinated by looking at things and saying, how can it be better? It's not any one thing. It's like right now, my job, my career path right now led me to store fixtures. I engineer and we manufacture, I engineer and project manage store fixtures for Kohl's, for Walmart, for whoever, I used to go into stores and look at the product that's on the shelves. Now I actually go into stores and look at the shelves themselves. All right. And I look at how everybody else does it. And I actually take shelves apart and I put them back together again. And the store managers and things are looking at me like I got 3 heads, but that's my influence. I just go in and I see how things are done. And I just want to say, okay, that's how they do it. How would I do it? What's my take on that? What's my takeaway? Is it as efficient as it can be? Does it look as nice as it can be? Does it do what it needs to do? You know what I mean? And that's what I look at. That's how I see it. That's how I've always seen things,
And do you think some of that came from your experiences at Hasbro?
Oh, definitely. So, but everything is a product, think about it. The stupid cardboard tube that holds wrapping paper, onto it is a product. It's a component of a whole. The box that the product comes in is a product out of itself. So I'm always looking at things and trying to figure them out.
And I think that's, although my focus is toys, hopefully it shows. That's one thing when I described the process of making G.I. Joe back in the 80s and 90s throughout the book series. Each book would kind of cover different areas. My hope was to just a general audience, whoever reads the books, is to grow a greater appreciation for those of you who are in product, whether it be, and I think I shared this with like Dave Kunitz once, like whether, it's like you said, it could just be a mop, what mechanisms, what goes into making a mop. It's not the most exciting. I mean, it's not as cool as a Geo or G.I. Joe or a Transformer or something, but there's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of behind the scenes. And so, I'm not going to go write a book about a mop and the behind the scenes, but with G.I. Joe, I think, we can all kind of go back to our childhood and remember. I mean, when I was a kid, I wasn't worrying about like, I wonder how do they make this arm move like this? Or why did this pom-pom gun shoot the way I was just like, hey, let's just have some fun. But as an adult, I think you just grow and you grow greater appreciation because you realize, for me, I'm not as hands-on person as you are, of course. I've never have been. I'll never claim to be, but I always have a great appreciation for those of you like a Ron Rudat and what he's able to do, and Mark Pennington and Kurt and all those guys. And then, from the vehicle standpoint, like you said, Bill Young, people have always stated great things about his design work, and, Kunitz and Cassidy and Frank Coronius and all those guys. And then engineers, and you learn all these different things. And I wouldn't say jealousy, but it's appreciation. Like I'm jealous I can't do those things, but at least I know people who can, and I have a great appreciation for you guys. So that's kind of where I stand with all that. But well, that's the last question I had. And again, I appreciate you coming on and sharing out your story. And I think that will give some better insight as to who you are and what your role was and what your contribution towards the brand. Like I said, I really want to share out and really branch out. I shared a lot of stories in the books, but a lot of it's design heavy. I get it, but there's so much that went into it from behind the scenes. So I appreciate you coming on and joining me. And again, I want to have you back on to talk about some of those other brands, whether it be Stargate or Transformers, because I know you have some good Transformer stuff that we want to share. And that's something, maybe we do a live stream with you and maybe get Benny on here and do something together and really let that fan base ask questions that I probably wouldn't know the questions asked. So, but again, I appreciate you having you on and joining me here today.
Absolutely. I appreciate you spending time with me as well. Always a pleasure, Dan.
Awesome.